Welcome to the fourth podcast of The Long View, which, as those who've been following the podcast, is about an economic consideration or a consideration of the economic effects of the COVID crisis. Today, I'm really pleased to invite to the podcast, to invite to Long View, Peter McCawley, who's a veteran economist, veteran Australian economist, many years at AusAID, has worked at the Asian Development Bank and now has a role at the ANU. So, Peter, welcome to the Long View podcast.
Thank you.
Our topic today is to look a little bit further, deeper into some of the economics of what's going on with COVID, and maybe just to open up, look under the rock a bit and see, what's really at stake here for us, both as Australians, but also adding a little bit with your international experience, the wider view. So I just invite you, Peter, to share with us what do you think are, say, the three main points that we should be thinking about when we're considering the economics of the COVID crisis we're in.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about it, because this is an astonishing crisis. And there are three main points, as you say. There are three main points that strike me as important. They are, first of all, it is a medical crisis. But second, that feeds in, that is closely related to an economic crisis. And the third thing that is striking is that this is a truly global crisis. You know, normally when we have an economic crisis of some sort, we had a global financial crisis 10 years ago, but that was mainly in OECD countries. We had an Asian financial crisis, but that was mainly in selected parts of Asia. It is very unusual to have what is actually a true global crisis. So those are the three aspects of them: the medical side of it, the economic side of it, and the global side of it.
Well, let's look at the medical one. What's at stake?
Well, in a sense, we're stuck at present. The world is stuck. We have this virus, this attack, and we're trying to deal with it. But there are several quite major problems. The first major problem is that, as epidemiologists are saying, we are still struggling to deal with to understand it. There's a lot we don't know. After all, the crisis really only became widespread, became known, came to attention. It's still only 6 months ago. So the scientific world is struggling to gather data and to understand this crisis and to understand the impacts, to understand why are there such big differences between countries. Some countries have coped reasonably well. Vietnam in our region is said to have coped reasonably well, for example. But India has not. And clearly, America has dealt with it very badly. So why exactly, from a scientific point of view, are there these differences? And the second big, huge medical problem really is a vaccine. We really need something to stop this crisis, to stop corona, and we need a vaccine. But we don't really know how long a vaccine will take, or even some epidemiologists are saying they are not at all sure. They can't be confident. They hope we'll have a vaccine, but they can't be sure. So in that medical area, then we're dealing with a wide range of uncertainties.
But that means that, doesn't it? That means that even if we take the more optimistic medical scenarios, and that a vaccine is presented, say, in about 12 months, and it's reasonably effective, it's still not going to solve everything instantaneously, is it? So, I mean, how long are we looking at in terms of, this virus affecting international movements, international trade, international economy? I mean, just looking at the health effects, 2 years, 3 years before we have any sense of a normality.
Yeah, look, Yeah. Now, look, who knows? My guess, my guess would be at least, we'll be lucky.
Yeah.
We'll be lucky to have got on top of it within 3 years.
Yeah.
The medical side of it. We'll be lucky. More likely 5, because you see, there's the problems. Even if we get a vaccine, there's the whole logistics problem of creating enough vaccine to get to maybe 3 or 4 billion people across the world. You've got to get to a very large number of people to set up enough herd immunity, set up enough protection. A lot of them are in developing countries. If we can't get this vaccine into developing countries, we're going to have a lot of countries around the world that will remain, in effect, global hotspots. So the logistics of doing this, you've got to produce enough vaccine for 3 or 4 billion people, and then you've got to jab the arms of 3 or 4 billion people across the world. Now,
you can't just get 10%, can you? You need to get like 65, 70, maybe even 80%.
Something like that. You know, I mean, the epidemiologists will tell us, but the logistics, even if we have a vaccine, you're looking at least 12 months, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years after the vaccine to start. Imagine the task of vaccinating enough people in India.
Yeah.
So
Africa. And so if that's right, if we're looking at, let's just say we're saying 3 years, right? Well, that has some pretty interesting implications for how a government, an Australian government, has to sort of think about how it structures.
I agree. No, I agree completely. This poses enormous problems for governments, which then gets me to my second issue, I suppose. I'm an economist, and how do you cope with it? We've got this trade-off. We've got this dilemma. There's almost a clash here between the medical requirements and the economic requirements.
Yeah.
On the medical side of it, you need to keep things fairly clamped down. You need to practice social distancing and all of this sort of thing, work from home and all the rest of it. But on the economic side of it, this really has very great economic impacts. And I'm worried, by the way, that we're 3 or 4 months into the economic impact. The real hit is probably yet to come. Yeah. There's this challenge, as we know, in Australia of removing JobSeeker at the end of September. And many countries have the same problem. They're looking at the same problem in the United States and in Europe and in the UK. They can't keep up these levels of support for too long. The levels of support are very high, very high. They'll have to start withdrawing the support. So what happens to the economies then? I am worried that the real economic hit is yet to come. I mean, we've just seen in the last few days here in Australia, Qantas has taken a big hit. Qantas has
I wonder what the real unemployment rate in Australia
exactly
is. Like, I mean, to say it's 14%, which is a number that people are talking about, that may be too low.
Yeah, well,
it may be.
I agree. Now, the Prime Minister was talking about putting the economy into hibernation for a while. I think he's dropped that phrase, but whether you call it hibernation or something else, some other people have called it a coma. But we'll have to withdraw from this at some stage. We have to. So this gets us back. This gets us to a core issue. Yeah. Looking over the next 3 or 4 years, what we're probably going to do is we're going to have to learn to live with Corona. Think about that for a minute. We're going to have to learn to live with it. And I'm not quite sure how we learn to live with it. We'll have to find some sort of a balance between the medical pressure, between the medical issues and the economic issues. And that's not going to be easy because there'll be a lot of disagreement. People will be unhappy. So it's really a perfect storm. And that gets me to my third point. It's a global storm.
Yeah.
We're seeing the storm in Australia, but this storm is going on in lots of other countries. I guess it's very clear in the United States where it's very divisive. But obviously in the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson is having problems. In Europe and across the whole of the developing world. India is now unlocking, but it may flare up again. China thought it had it under control, and now it's flared up again in Beijing.
Brazil is just totally out of control.
So it's an astonishing mess.
Yeah.
Now, so far here in Canberra, we seem to have dealt with it reasonably well. We're very lucky in Canberra, extremely lucky. We're lucky because it's not hard to maintain social distance in Canberra. We're not crowded. Most of us have a high standard of living, and most
Also,
of us
the labour market with a public sector
yes,
focus.
exactly. No,
More
sure.
insulated.
We're very lucky, and we need to remember this.
Yeah.
We need to remember that we are lucky in Canberra. So those are the three issues as I see them: the medical issue, the economics issue, and the global challenge. And I think it's
that from a from perspective of Australia's as a trading nation, with its wealth and GDP often driven, GDP per capita also driven by capacity to export to the world economy, proposes challenges. But yet again, it seems to me that obviously if there's going to be an international global recession, then there'll be a reduction in demand for our agricultural and mineral exports. They seem to be holding up at the moment. But are we going to? I mean, that's one. Are we going to take a bit of a tsunami? Do we think to Australia's growth over the medium term from a declining world economy, or will we be able to? What's your feeling, Peter?
yeah, maybe we might be the lucky country again.
Yeah,
I was just looking at some data, some figures this morning, and the region of the world, the part of the world that is so far dealing with the crisis in economic terms most successfully is Asia, East and Southeast Asia, developing Asia. And that those are our main markets for our resources and our agricultural products and even our education, which is problems at present. So Australia being the lucky country, we may well find, I mean, in many ways, we're very, very fortunate.
Yeah.
I don't know if we know how fortunate we are, but we live on the rim of the part of the world, East and Southeast Asia and South Asia, which in the past, the last 30 or 40 years, has had a very high and dynamic growth rate, and which right now, on the IMF's latest forecasts, the region is going to have a growth, according to the IMF, of something like minus 1%.
Yeah.
But that is far better. No, the other parts of the world, you're looking at minus 6%, minus 8%.
Yeah, these are very,
12%.
very, very big numbers.
So we may be saved again by the lucky country, by virtue of being, and this, I must say, looking forward 30 or 40 years ahead, as a person who works on Asia, I'm not sure that we understand how lucky we are and whether we are responding to the opportunities in Asia. That gets us to another question. But we are a strange, rich country. Here we are on the rim of the best part of the world to be selling resources to. So we'll have to see.
International economics is better for us than it might be for the United States or for Russia or for European nations. The focus of policy, I suppose, is on trying to maintain as vibrant a domestic economy as we can. And what worries me particularly is that there'll be a massive shakeout in sometime in the next, after JobKeeper is phased out. I expect it to be transitioned out. I don't think they're going to have a cliff in September. I think they couldn't really still be doing it next year. At the most, it'll have 6 months to taper off, I think. So we're going to look at this pretty horrible situation, especially, for example, you're a school leaver. I've got a person in year 12. I've got two of my older children at the ANU. A scary time to be a young person, and a scary time to be a parent, really. Because
I agree. I agree.
I agree entirely. You've invested in them, you love them, and you think, oh wow, it's going to be hard.
I agree.
Yeah,
and that's in some ways that's really my key point.
Yeah,
we're really looking at a humdinger of a crisis. This is a quite extraordinary crisis, and I'm not sure if people really have absorbed.
Get it? Yeah,
it is an extraordinary. We're 3 months 4 months into an extraordinary crisis, and it's probably going to go on for quite a while yet, and it may well get worse, and the exit is 3-4 years away. It's a very difficult period.
Well, there was this, of course, I'm a bit of a scholar of, the Scottish Enlightenment and those sort of people. So there was this guy called Carlyle who coined the phrase that, economics is the dismal science. I think today we're sort of propounding the story, unfortunately, that we are a bit the prophets of the dismal science. But I suppose for Canberra and for Australia, it's less dismal than it is for the rest of the world. I really thank you for the opportunity to engage with you, Peter, particularly the 3 insights that you've given us, and a bit of the reality shock I think I found, my sort of takeout, if you have takeouts from a little conversation, is that, it's, we think we've done well and the people sort of think we're getting over it. Well, I think we're going to have to take pause and think again. Thank you for the opportunity to engage with you today, Peter. I enjoyed it immensely.
Thank you.